continue. Hey everybody, this is M.E. Thomas. I'm here with DJ Terrarium. DJ Terrarium, I'm going to ask you the same question I ask everybody, which is what is it like to be you?
Hey, it's good to meet you. Um, so yeah, my name is DJ, and I would say that I'm often frustrated. Um, for instance, if I'm sitting in traffic and I'm behind a million people on my way somewhere, I have a little bit of road rage. Inside, I have a lot of road rage, but I don't really, you know, act on it so much. I would say that I have a lot of sadness, or yeah, I guess so. Not a lot of sadness. I have some sadness. Probably more like self-pity at times. Um, and that's just, when things don't go your way, sometimes I can feel that way. So,
I actually felt that way recently, and it kind of surprised me. Things didn't weren't going my way a couple different kind of ways, and I felt like melancholy
yeah.
is like a good word for it. And I was
hmm
talking to my girlfriend about it, and I said I feel like I've always had a little bit of a tendency to being a little bit melancholy,
hmm
especially oddly during the summer. Melancholy and I was kind of like, I wonder where this comes from because it's not even like I would say that I am sad so much as I like melancholy is a good word or feeling like a little blue or
hmm
something. And then I intuition told me that it's like a form of grief for like things not like the world not being what I had hoped or
Yeah.
things not going as it I had hoped. I was like, oh, okay. And I think, my girlfriend was like, well, what are you not getting that you've hoped for? And I said, actually, truth be told, the stuff that I've gotten or the things have worked out better. Like I never would have imagined kind of like uh finding somebody that I'm like soul bonded to, which is the way I feel about my girlfriend, and having her as a partner. And yeah, I do have that. Like I
Wonderful.
have all these really great things,
Yeah.
and I objectively appreciate them. But there's still something about like having an expectation and then having it not be met that still leads me to a little sense of melancholy. Is that something similar to what you experience?
I would say yes. And you know what? Because I've been only recently been thinking about this stuff again after seeing your channel just within the last week. And I was thinking to myself, how much do my emotions control or contribute to my actions and my behaviors? And, I do feel like there is some type of a pressure or, you know, um, self-pity or melancholy, just because it's like a daily drudgery of having to do certain things. But I think what I've found recently is that most of that is tied, at least for me, to a lack of sleep. I find myself staying up way too late, getting only 5, 6 hours of sleep, and then just kind of like uh, drudging my way through the day. And I don't know. I think I'm used to living like this, and I think that just becomes my life. Whereas on days that I sleep in, I feel way better. And but at the same time, I don't necessarily fully recuperate from the lack of sleep throughout the week,
Right.
because even on the weekend when I do get a sleep in, I'm sure there's side effects from that, that basically come out through my personality, the way I act. You know.
Yeah, I will tell you something, DJ Terrarium, is that I sleep like average 10 hours a night, and it's like my top priority. I just bought like this, $6,000, $5,000 smart bed,
Mm.
sleep eight bed. I have no code. But no savings code to share. Although if you like Google Huberman from Huberman Labs, there's a code or something.
Mhm.
Yeah, I prioritize my sleep above all else. And I find it to be life's greatest pleasure. And
Yeah.
especially on days like when I'm feeling melancholy, I think maybe it's just time for a nap because there's something about just being released from the grind, I guess, just getting a break from a particular thing. I think sleep is such a great break. It's a great break for me from my thinking. It's a great break from me. Like I think part of my sleep is because I want to restore the body and mind or whatever. But part of the sleep, the amount of sleep, I think is that I have then like 2 hours less than, your average sleeper to
Mhm.
live life.
Yes.
It is awesome. I think maybe it makes me kind of sound depressed. I was talking to my mom's friends about this, just happened to be like having to chit chat them for some reason. And they're like,
Mhm.
that's depression. And I was like, oh, okay. But I could be depression. I know I'm like melancholy, 10 hours of sleep. Like normal people would be like, it's depression. I think that there's like always been a world weariness that I've experienced. And I'm not sure if you can really call it depression because I do
Mhm.
have moments of engagement. And even though I would embrace death when it comes, and I don't fear death, I don't have a desire for death either. I have like this theory that you might as well just spend all your money down before you die.
Yeah.
You can always find something fun to do. I love skiing, so that's always the answer, especially when it's the winter time.
Yes. I like skiing too. Yeah. For me, I think I think the scariest part of death is maybe just what's in my mind of thinking of what it might be. And I'm kind of a negative thinker about it. So I'm always thinking, oh, this is going to be like painful, you know?
Oh,
Um,
like the actual dying leading up to it?
yeah. So I think that's probably why most people are afraid of it. I'm assuming.
The pain? You
Yeah.
know, it's weird though, because do you ever do this where you're like, I do push-ups, because if I don't do push-ups, then it's like my body falls apart. So every day I'm doing
Yes.
push-ups. I'm, like I got in a surfing crash kind of injury over the
Hmm.
summer. And then I was doing up to 60 push-ups, but not deep because of
Hmm.
the injury. So now I feel like good enough that I can go back to like my normal level of depth or whatever. So now it's just like 10, but I push myself to do 20. But it's like I feel so much pressure in my head and I feel like I'm gonna like burst. Same thing when I do my wall sits, which I also have to do because
Hmm.
I'm old. There's, there's no like beach body. There's just like, would you like to sleep well
Yeah.
without like injuring your neck or something while asleep or whatever? But it's interesting. Like my guided meditation guy that I listen to on the Calm app, his name's Jeff Warren. He's talking about like swinging like a pendulum, your attention in and out. And it is true. Like when you're doing a wall sit, you can either be like, oh, I'm totally, um, in total exertion right now, or it's like you can just swing it away and it's as if it's like happening to somebody else. So that's one reason why I don't fear death.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, well, well, I guess like three different things I can tell you about this. But one of the recent ones, which just happened maybe like a month ago, which was I went to the hospital to go get regular checkup. I went and they drew blood, and I think they hit a nerve or something in my arm. And so I started getting lightheaded, and then lightheaded enough to where I had to like lay back. And then my limbs started going cold, and it felt like I had electricity flowing through like my hands and stuff like that, my extremities. And they took it extremely serious, and they wheeled me into the ER. And my body's getting I'm getting cold, and I'm shaking from the coldness.
Wow.
And as they're rolling me on this, one of those beds that they move you on, whatever those
Yeah,
stretcher things are
gurney,
on the
I think.
wheels,
Yeah.
I'm just staring up at the ceiling, and I see my reflection in one of those dome. It's like this dome that goes over the cameras, and it's just like this mirror. And I see myself in this bed being wheeled away, and I'm like, at that moment, I wasn't afraid if I wasn't gonna make it. I didn't know what was happening exactly. Um, and then they wheeled me into the ER, and I'm like looking around the ER, and they had these curtains over the front of the ER room, which is just a big pane of glass with a door, and they just have this curtain over it that the room because of that, it kind of looked like a casket. It looked like I was in
Wow.
a giant casket. I'm like, oh, and I wasn't afraid. I didn't know if I was going to die or not, but it still had some symptoms of getting cold, right? Feels like maybe that could have been a sign.
Huh.
But it was in such a, strange circumstance. It wasn't like a car wreck or anything like that. It was just getting my blood drawn.
Yeah. And so, but you still have a fear of death, even though you had this kind of death experience and it was fine?
Yes. I think I still have the fear of the potential pain, and it's not something that's on my mind a lot. I feel like years ago it would just kind of creep up on me, and the thought of death would occur.
Huh.
And that's like another story I can tell you about if you're interested.
Yeah.
So this was, I think, 2018, and I had just started to get. So I used to back, I don't know, throughout my life, and I guess since high school, I used to smoke a lot of weed, right? And I don't know, later in the 20 teens, I had a connection with like tinctures, and um, so I bought some tinctures, and I guess I
Pinterest are
had,
what again? They're
it's like, so it's alcohol, basically, like when they make it, they use alcohol to kind of absorb the THC in it. So it's kind of like vanilla extract, but of THC extract.
okay.
And you just put like a drop, like in your mouth or under your tongue, and it absorbs through, your in through your mouth. And so there were multiple things going on this night, right? Um, One, I had some mold growing in the apartment, and um, so I had sectioned off part of the room to get that fixed. It was going to be fixed like the next day. And it was in the middle of the winter. So I'm in Chicago. And in the winter, people don't open their windows or anything like that. Like, and I noticed, like, I'm like, people don't have their windows open all winter. So it's like 7 months of like you're just breathing the same air.
Yeah.
And of course, when if you haven't had if you haven't been high, for anyone that is listening, I one of the things that happens to me is I get a little bit paranoid, right? That's one of the symptoms I get. And I feel like it's just kind of like it heightens that awareness of my vulnerabilities.
Mm.
And so throughout the night, it was like I hadn't gotten any sleep, right, the night before. And I was just taking this tincture, and I had some obligations to do in the morning. So I'm like up late, I have stuff that's on my mind, I have stuff to
Up
do.
late, like always.
Yes. And I ended up taking too much of this tincture because it didn't kick in fast like I was expecting it. But like, like an hour later or whatever, hour and a half later, it kicks in. And I feel like I've had that experience, which I've heard before, which is people think they're going to die, right? Like I've heard this story about, oh, smoked too much weed. I think I'm going to die. They call the hospital. I don't know. Or they call the emergency line. And I'm like, that's fake until it happened to me.
Uh-huh.
And at that moment, it was the first time it's happened where I felt like I was facing the Grim Reaper. Like the Grim Reaper was in the room with me. And it was a being of, like it had complete control over me. And I had like, I basically tried everything I could do to get it to go away. And it was the feeling of the inevitability of my death. So I knew I wasn't going to die that night. There was nothing wrong with me per se, that was mortal, but the inevitability of, I knew it was going to happen for 100%. Like this is like it finally really clicked. And but it felt so near, right? Because when the moment does come, you're going to think, oh, my life went by so quickly, you know, kind of how we do it. Like it felt like high school was yesterday. And it was right there. And it was absolutely terrifying. And I couldn't get, I tried different things to get it to go away. I tried distracting myself. I tried the get down on my knees and pray, you know, to try to be saved or something. And what eventually got it to go away was a mantra that I came up with while I was going through this. And now this period of me like freaking out was probably several hours.
Yeah.
And the mantra was just me repeating the words accept the
Interesting.
inevitable. Yes. And it's just
Yeah.
accept and acceptance. And like this Grim Reaper of a feeling went away, it disappeared, it just vanished. And I was like, holy crap. And the next day I was still like slightly shooken up from this experience. It was absolutely frightening. And that's what got me to stop smoking weed and taking tinctures and all that.
Wow. That is nuts. That is such a crazy story. I love it. Uh, do you have you like taken that mantra like into your life in other ways, or just that was like a one and done?
It that feeling came back maybe 2 weeks later, and I used it again, and it worked again.
Interesting.
And that was without THC or anything. It just was like a this death is coming, and maybe I would wake up in the middle of the night, and the thought would be there instantly, and I would use that to make it go away again. Um, I'm trying to think of the only other time that I can think of off the top of my head where I actually used it was when and it wasn't for me, it was just advice I gave to someone else. I told my father this story, and his second wife, the woman he was actually married to, had passed away from brain cancer. And he was absolutely distraught, and he was this guy that he would never cry, right? This is the first time I feel like I've ever seen him cry before. And, he was just a guy that would never show any emotions really, other than like anger or maybe excitement, some real just base stuff. And, I could hear him. It was just over the phone because he was in another state. And, I told him that story. I'm like, well, if this is of any help to you, this is what I did to get over, my fear of death, and maybe it'll help you accept, what just happened. I never got feedback whether he used it or not, but I think he appreciated the story.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I feel a similar way about acceptance. I mean, I like Stoic philosophy, and that's like a big thing for them is acceptance. In fact, they're kind of like memento mori about stuff where it's like, remembering death can actually help us
Mm-hmm.
uh to live life, completely today in this present moment.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been thinking theologically recently. I actually don't remember if I have mentioned this, but for the past kind of 3 years, 2 to 3 years, I have been wondering. There's a scripture. It's in the New Testament. I forget which gospel it's in, but it's Jesus talking. And he says basically like the paraphrase is he's saying, "Hey, like take my yoke upon you and learn of me and basically kind of just like swap out all your ways of living for my ways of living and it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be so much better." And he
Mm-hmm.
gives like a weird statement. He says, "For I am meek and lowly of heart." So it's kind of in the middle of all this where he's saying this. He's like promising like you're going to be so much happier. My yoke is easy and the burden is light and whatever. But he why does he give that little statement, which I think is kind of like giving credentials, like believe me about this, what I'm asking you to do, because I am meek and lowly of heart. That's what he's trying to say. It'd be like, trust me, Jamie, like follow me or whatever, because I have $1 billion, or I have all power or whatever. He could have said other things like that, but instead he said that he's meek and lowly of heart. So for the past 3 years, I've been kind of like, this is so weird. What a weird.
Yeah.
Those are really weird credentials to give somebody when you're trying to convince them to like basically leave behind everything they think they know about the world or whatever and follow you instead and kind of substitute your way of life for theirs. But recently I've been thinking this idea of being like acceptance and really being close to reality as being a source of power. And potentially, if you kind of think, if you have like a theological belief about Jesus, maybe that is the source of his power. So the first thought I had was like, oh, maybe this is like Jesus saying like I can meet everybody where they are. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that is true. I think that's a great skill to meet people wherever they are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you can imagine a million different ways in which that would be useful to have that ability. But then I think it kind of like expands for more. And it's not just that he's meeting everybody where they are, he's meeting reality where it is in every single moment. And
Mm-hmm.
he has just the ability to kind of accept, which, if you can see reality perfectly clearly in the moment, it seems like that is like a great source of power.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is there anything that we get from like our illusions of whatever that isn't surpassed by the insight, the power, the strength, the comfort that we get from not having illusions about reality, just trying to meet reality wherever it is in that moment. So I
Mm-hmm.
similarly, whenever I have kind of existential angst or thoughts kind of like that, or just feel kind of overwhelmed, I think too, if I can just meet reality where it is in this moment, I will feel better. And I always end up feeling better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have mantras that you use when, if you remember to even use them?
Yeah, let me think. I do have mantras. Let me think if I have ones that are kind of related to this. I guess so. I saw this dude once at Six Flags.
Mm-hmm.
He had a t-shirt that said "Life Wide Open."
Mm-hmm.
And I like that, where it's like I can be so open, like so extremely open that like just everything kind of is going through me. I'm
Mm-hmm.
so open. And that's one I guess that I would think. Another one too, I think about this theologically. There's a scripture in the Book of Mormon, Mormon scripture,
Mm-hmm.
that says, "And he loveth them who will have him to be their God." So let me say that again. And he loveth them who will have him to be their God. And that's one thing I think too, religiously is just like this idea of like submitting and being kind of like childlike and like meek and lowly of heart. And just kind of like very like AA 12 steps, being like I am submitting to a higher power and I don't need to know everything or understand everything or orchestrate or control
Mm-hmm.
anything. I can just submit. And so that's one thing that I will say as a mantra sometimes is like, I will have thee to be my God. I'll
Mm-hmm.
repeat that, which to me is just like another kind of submission thing, though, where it's
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't have to be like the top gun or whatever. I'm
Mm-hmm.
okay at wherever my level is. And so like this idea of like I acknowledge, that I'm not all knowing or all powerful. And if there is a being that is that way, then I'm definitely submitting to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, yeah, I feel that. I feel that. I haven't read into any of the religions, any of the theology really. I started listening to an audiobook of the Old Testament, and I don't know, I just wasn't feeling it at that time to go further into it.
Huh.
Um, but I feel like I am like you in that I am open to hearing and about different ways of life and different, like I guess what well, I have low, I guess I should say I have selective judgment, right? When it comes to people's certain way of life, unless somehow it's, but I think that's also like my mood is really, really affects that too. So it's like, do I feel like dealing with this, or how do I feel like dealing with this person? Um, so I feel like I'm not super consistent, right? Maybe I think I have a bias when it comes to judgments. There's some things I judge harder, more harshly than others. Um, but yeah.
When you say judge, do you mean like a moral judgment, like this is right or wrong, or like in a moral sense, like this is a baddie, this is a goody thing?
Um, I I feel like one of the, I don't know, entities that I've that I'm okay with judging is, let's say, people of power, right?
Uh-huh.
And you may have heard this recently about punching up, right? It's
Yeah,
okay to punch up, don't punch down to people that don't have a choice or whatever. And I kind of feel that there is some inside of me, and I'm not saying that like as far as like what I would uh you know expect anyone else to do, but um I do feel that I often, if I do judge, it's to the more powerful entity, whatever it might be. So if there's two, um, I don't know, warring nations, I usually root for the underdog.
uh-huh.
Because the other, I just assume that the other country has more power to even put an end to it.
I
Um,
see.
and I think that's true too of individuals when it comes to, um, I don't know, like what side that they are on. I almost just like associate certain people with a certain side as well. And if it seems like they are siding with a force that is, that seems immoral to me, then I'll have some judgment about them. But yet again, I'm a hypocrite because there's, some things, some thoughts that I have that are contradictory towards each other. Um, and I guess it's just some things I haven't fully thought through yet.
Yeah, that's very insightful to realize that. I think that, I know that about myself too, that I have beliefs that don't easily reconcile with each other,
Mm. Yeah,
or maybe are flat out contradictory to each other.
yeah.
That, yeah, I think that's probably true of everybody, is my guess. If I had to bet or something, $10 on it. Uh, but I think a lot of people don't realize that, and and you can kind of see it in these like social science studies where they will tell people this is like what you wrote, a week ago on the thing is that, your favorite ice cream is like, I don't know, chocolate. And
Mhm.
then they'll be like, "Yep, that is true. That's my favorite ice cream." Even though it's not that they're lying,
Yeah.
you had put vanilla or something. Like
Mhm.
people have like a great desire to see themselves as being consistent, I
Yeah.
think, and to try to force their beliefs into kind of what a semblance of consistency. I think it's better though to, acknowledge the inconsistency. I think, in some ways I don't even beat myself up about the inconsistency because I
Mhm.
think, light is inconsistent too. It's both a
Yeah.
particle and a wave.
Yeah.
So, like, the heck?
Mhm.
And so there's certain things where I'm like, I'm sure we'll understand light better someday, understand how it can be both a particle and a wave that resolves the seeming inconsistency. I think, though, that's like a great insight. That's like a very impressive thing to be able to recognize in yourself and to admit to.
Yeah. And so have you come to accept these inconsistencies in your life, or do you think there's more that we just haven't figured out and maybe if we go deep enough into the knowledge of each of these thoughts or beliefs, then they'll somehow merge at the end.
Yeah. There's like this poem, again, it's kind of a religious poem that I really like. I think it's uh I think it's kind of a famous poet. Hold on, let me find this really quickly. Yeah, I guess it's based on Psalms 143, verse 8. In thee do I trust, cause me to know the way wherein I should walk. And it goes like this: not now, but in the coming years, it may be in the better land. We'll read the meaning of our tears, and there sometime we'll understand. And I feel like I feel that like a lot. Like I do. I think part of my grief about expectations and stuff, even though it doesn't kind of make sense, I uh rationally to me,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm like my expectations have been exceeded in so many ways. There's still a rub there. And so I definitely feel the rub, I guess is a good way to put, but there's also I don't know why I have all these like theological references this time. There's like a another that I like uh it's in the Bible somewhere. I used to have it in my calendar, like reminding me each day. Yeah, Hebrews 11. It's kind of funny sometimes, I think, with these things where you're like, I don't believe this I have a hard
Mm-hmm.
time with, no, no, no. And then you're like, this though I really do like. So
Yeah.
this one is yeah, Hebrews whatever I said in verse 13. These all died in the faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, and were persuaded of them, and embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. I like that because it gets again to this idea of acceptance, that if you kind of just confess that you're a stranger and a pilgrim here, that you're just a sojourner.
Mm-hmm.
You're just here for like a temporary little thing, and like you just got dropped down, like your consciousness dropped down in the middle of this weird time and place, like very arbitrarily. I think that that is freeing. Like I find again, like another Bible scripture, and the truth shall set you free, to be true. Like the more I just accept and the more I just confess that I'm just a stranger, a pilgrim
Mm-hmm.
here, then the more I feel like I feel the rub less, kind of in that way where I told you how like with the pendulum you can like focus on the wall sit and be like, my brain feels like it's gonna explode, so much pressure or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and then pendulum out and then get like a different perspective on it and then think I could do this for like minutes maybe. Not true, by the way.
Yeah, I read about that pendulum swing, and I read this a similar story that I guess it's also kind of like a little story or mantra that you can tell yourself, which is when you have emotions, if you're very emotional, one thing that you can do is imagine or visualize yourself sitting in a park and you're on the bench, and from your peripheral vision from your left side, somebody is beginning to come into view. They're walking their dog and they're just going to pass by in front of you, and then they're going to pass off to your right side and kind of disappear. And we might have these intrusive thoughts that are kind of like that. They just show up. You
Mm,
just say hello and let it walk off, right? Just don't if you engage with it, especially if it's like a thought that makes you angry, it's just going to make it, they're going to stick around, you know?
yeah. Yeah, I
So,
used to not understand intrusive thoughts at all. Like I was like, I guess I'm a bad person for having these thoughts, that just like pop up in my brain and seem
mm-hmm,
irrational.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then my girlfriend would say too, this was a really weird thing. She would say like, "Oh, you said this crazy threatening thing to me." I was like, "I do not remember saying that." I feel like I'm being gaslit. She's like, I feel like I'm being gaslit with you saying that you didn't say it. That this was like years ago, years ago.
Yeah.
And then like maybe 2 or 3 years into the relationship, she was like, you know what? I think I finally realized what it is. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're just saying intrusive thoughts and they're so intrusive that you don't even realize you're saying them. And they're not your real beliefs. You're just like you as
Yeah.
in me. Like I was just saying like these weird little thoughts that would pop into my brain. And she'd be like, well, I'm not going to invest more in this relationship if that's how she feels.
Yeah.
And I was just like so clueless to it. Like that's how clueless I was to my intrusive thoughts, is apparently I was saying them without realizing. And that kind of freaks me out. I
Mm-hmm.
think whenever we realize that we've been doing things that we've been completely oblivious to,
Mm-hmm.
that that like eats away at our illusion of being in control.
Yeah. Yeah, and we might have more of these in the future, as like our understanding of things expands, and then we'll look back and be like, "Oh man, I was driving with blinders on."
Totally.
Yeah, that definitely can occur if you're having an argument with somebody.
Mm. Like intrusive thoughts, like saying them or whatever.
Sometimes you might just, and instead of just trying to resolve the conflict, to like agree to disagree, we might want to prove a point or something,
Yeah.
and even try to stump them, like, "Oh, your logic doesn't make sense. Here's why." And
Yeah.
then at the end of it, you could look back and be like, "Why was I trying to prove a point at that moment when tensions were high? We should have
Yeah.
maybe resolved it in another way that would have cut it shorter, cut that argument shorter, and just apologize and kind of move on." Uh, But at the same time, I think it depends on who you're arguing with or trying to resolve a conflict with.
Yeah.
Um, are they are they a logical person that would hear your point and like, doesn't make sense to them, or are you just throwing stuff at a wall and it's not really going to do anything, you know, change their thoughts?
Yeah, because I agree with you about this. And I think that as much as I value reality, and especially recently, I've been on a real reality kick where I just am trying to open myself up and submit to reality as much as possible. Like I'm working on a yoga pose or something where I'm like just
Mm-hmm.
trying to deepen the
Mm-hmm.
stretch until I make contact, hopefully, like that's the goal. Um
Are you trying to do the
I
splits?
yeah, the splits, exactly. Yeah, trying to but I realized that not everybody values reality or the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And like I have to accept, I feel like I have to accept that that's their choice to make. And I don't have to impose on them, but nor do I let them impose on me
Mm-hmm.
their lack of reality. If they're
Mm-hmm.
trying to impose on me, like lies or whatever, then, I boss them up. But if they want to like live in a world of delusion, like who am I to, you know, override their choice or so try to like,
Yeah.
live their life for them. Like that's not what I want to be doing anyways. It's hard enough to live my own life, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like I'm trying to, when that happens, it's like I'm trying to like hold on to the people that I do have, yet we're different in certain ways that it's hard to kind of like live, or it's hard to accept that. And
Yeah.
I'm like, should I hold on? Am I wasting my time here?
Yeah.
Should I
Recently
find, yeah.
yeah, my parents have gotten, in fact, even more my mom. Normally, like whenever there's some like thing that I find distasteful, it's more my dad.
Hmm.
Uh, but this time it's more my mom where I'm like, are you just like making stuff up? Are you
Hmm.
just like and I think you can it's easy to kind of get caught up in it because you hear somebody lying and they seem to be able to get away with it or whatever, and it seems to just be like whatever, like that
Hmm.
it's more about who's like shouting loudest than like
Yeah.
who has the truth behind
Hmm.
them. And I think there's instances in which that can be true. I think that that perception has its own force. Perception of reality has its own force in addition to reality. And it's kind of like the tides or whatever. It's like sometimes they'll sync up and sometimes not. But it's like perception can never get too far
Hmm.
from like the certain gravity point of reality. And reality really is the defining gravity point for perception.
Hmm.
So I always just think, because I am a stock trader too.
Hmm.
I think that this is a really good illustration. People can be really, let's say, bullish, really
Hmm.
positive
Hmm.
about a particular stock. For instance, let's say maybe Nvidia,
Hmm.
it's like a really
Yeah.
popular stock right now.
Hmm.
People keep saying like it's way oversold, like
Hmm.
there's no way that its value is as high as this based on the stock price or whatever. But
Hmm.
people will still kind of keep buying it. And this is true of any kind of bubble. People kind of get involved and they think, this can last forever. It's just up,
Hmm.
up, up.
Hmm.
And there's no real connection to reality until
Hmm.
eventually reality does come. It always comes, like I've done made the same mistake, and had like stocks that were worth, like $60 now worth $1. That
Uh-huh.
sucks. That
Yeah.
always sucks.
It's a participation trophy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
But that's, it's like what is the phrase? Reality's a bitch or whatever. But yeah, like reality will check you unless you check yourself. So
Hmm.
I always try to reality check myself. But with my mom, I'm almost like, are you just like, but I think with her, and this is kind of interesting what you said earlier about like some of these moral-ish judgments.
Hmm.
With her, I kind of don't really fault her because her mom was the same way, same exact
Hmm.
weird things that they got hung up on. And her sisters are the same way. I'm like, this has to be genetic or
Uh-huh.
environmental or both or whatever. And that's really hard because there's like actually another concept in Mormonism is that so like I think a lot of religions think you get baptized for your sins. And in Mormon temples, you get washed clean too from not your sins, but from what are called the blood and sins of your generation, which I
Hmm.
guess is just all the prejudice, bias, misunderstandings, toilet thoughts,
Hmm.
philosophies that are just, garbage nonsense,
Hmm.
but that you were raised in those situations. That's how you were socialized. And so, of course, you have a tendency to have those thoughts and beliefs. Speaking of Paula Deen,
Hmm.
do you know Paula Deen?
It sounds familiar. Go ahead.
She's like a Southern cook or whatever. She
Yes.
had her
Okay. Yeah.
own
Yeah. Yeah.
TV show. And so I was like thinking like Paula Deen, did she get canceled? Did she like, like I had like the thought that she said the N-word or whatever. And apparently like the reason why she got canceled was because in a deposition, she got canceled in like 2018, 2019 or something. But in
Oh
a
wow.
deposition from like 10 years before that,
Hmm.
somebody asked her like, have you ever said the N-word? And she's like, I'm sure I've said it,
Uh-huh.
and I
Uh-huh.
appreciate her honesty there. But
Hmm.
then 10 years later, people were like, you did what?
Uh,
You said the N-word?
oh no.
I was like, oh yeah, cancel her. Yeah, because
Yeah.
what is she in her 60s and a
Uh,
southerner?
hmm.
She probably, like she probably is like racist to the core or whatever. It has nothing to do with the way she was raised or anything else. It's just interesting.
Yeah, I don't know her enough to know. But yeah, I guess that's come up quite a bit in the last, I don't know, at least 15 years or so, with all these YouTube videos, the internet's everyone's talking about everybody, and especially, pop culture, anyone that's a celebrity, we know about like a lot about these people, because
Yeah.
word spreads and somehow it gets around. And I don't know how much of it's true, about certain things, but if there is a truth to it, it might go around, and we'll find out about it.
Yeah. I think Michael Jackson's another good example of this. Like, I think he's a musical genius for a lot of
Hmm.
reasons.
Hmm.
I'm not sure what's up with him personally. Like, I
Hmm.
don't know, I kind of don't know what to believe there or something
Yeah, I
in
still
terms
listen to
of
his
Michael
music.
Jackson.
I
Oh,
still listen
yeah.
to his music.
Me
Yeah,
too. I love his music.
yeah,
Off the Wall, that's my favorite album, maybe.
yeah.
It's
It
hard.
makes me want to move for sure.
Move?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Oh,
That's what
dance.
dance. Yeah,
Yeah.
dance. I just got into dancing within the last 3 years. I never
Like,
like none of my family or anyone dances. Like none of my extended family, none of us are dancers. And then I just got into it like 3 years ago, and I started going to drum circle,
oh,
and
nice.
I picked up drumming, and then drumming taught me to move to the rhythm. And at some point, I hurt my finger, and I'm like, I don't even need the drum. I'm just gonna move. And so I kind of picked up dancing that way in the least awkward way possible.
I love this for you. What an
Hmm.
exciting new thing for you. And you love it?
Oh yeah, yep, I do it every week.
That's awesome.
Hmm. But yeah, so Michael Jackson, yeah, yeah, I'll dance to some of that.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah, I don't think I would ever not listen to him. I don't know, like what he would have had to have done for me to not listen to him, where his voice maybe makes me cringe or something. It
Yeah.
would have to be like it would have to be something that I have no control over. Like, oh, his voice makes me cringe for me to like, all right, I can't do it anymore. But I don't know what it would take. And I would have to like believe maybe the stories. Maybe I'd have to have like some personal insight or something, or experience with him where like he makes me cringe. Now I can't listen to his voice anymore.
Yeah. That's interesting because I think with this that scripture from Hebrews applies to stuff like this too for me, where I just confess that I'm a stranger and a pilgrim when it
Hmm.
comes to Michael Jackson. Like I have
Uh,
no
yeah,
certainty,
yeah.
and sometimes people I think don't like that. There's actually like a Stoic quote that I think maybe was attributed to Marcus Aurelius, but now people have debunked it, where it basically said something like you don't have to have an opinion about everything.
Yeah.
you know like people want you to have an opinion about abortion
Mhm.
or whatever else, or Donald Trump, and they want you to have like certainty. But I keep thinking about this quote in the movie Conclave with Rafe Fiennes. It's about choosing the new pope. It's not a documentary or anything, it's
Mhm.
fictional, but
Mhm.
he gives like this little speech. He's one of the cardinals in charge of the choosing of the new pope,
Mhm.
and he says that the worst sin is certainty,
Yeah.
because if you have certainty, then there's no role for faith. I
Right.
also think if you have certainty, there's kind of no role for learning
Right.
or for openness or for
Hmm.
acceptance,
Yeah.
for
Yes.
change, for people being dynamic. If you're so certain about a person, can they change?
Yeah. Right. Yep. What's a synonym for that, over, being too certain about, when someone's too certain about something?
Yeah, hubris.
Let me see. Certain synonym. Anyways, so this has happened to me within the last, like, I guess just a year and a half ago, where so when I moved to where I'm living at now, I moved in with I rented a room in a house, and that the roommate basically was, he thought he knew everything about certain topics, and so there was no room for discussion, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't even have an opinion basically unless it was completely aligned with his, and I just would have to agree. And if I had if I brought up any opinion, it could turn into an argument, that kind of thing, and it just became toxic. So I had to move out of there.
Wow.
I mean, it was an angry person too, so it was just like I couldn't live with that every day. Like waking up and like, oh, there's this person in the room that's just it's just too over all consuming in my life.
Yeah,
And get my
especially,
own place. Yeah,
yeah, if you're prone to melancholy.
yeah, Yeah, I'm generally pretty chill. I don't blow up in people's faces. It hasn't really had to happen, I guess.
Yeah.
What were we talking about? Yeah, so yeah, and actually, as far as like after moving out or looking for a new roommate, I actually had put that in the ad. I was like, I want someone that is not, um, like that. Basically, I was looking, I started interviewing people, right? Like it was a job
Smart.
interview. I think I met up in at least either through conversations or met in person, met like 5 or 6 different people, and I'm like, nope, this person's definitely not a good suitable roommate for me. You know, I was like, oh, it's just kind of eye opening too. It's like it's almost like we're getting married. We have to like, what temperature do you like the house? You like it 68 or do you like it 78? I'm like, that makes
Yeah,
a big difference.
that is a big difference. Yeah.
Um, And yeah, so earlier I had mentioned that, I just started thinking about these things again. And the way I came across your channel was I was just looking for like a new like murder mystery show or something to watch. I'm like, oh, I kind of like these things, documentary or whatever. So I watched like a documentary on Jeffrey Dahmer and like these different guys, and I found somebody that interviewed the guy, and then I found this other YouTube channel where it's like there's like these 4 people, and it's like this panel, and they do like behavior analysts. They analyze their behavior, and they're like, "Yep, this person's a psychopath," and that kind of thing. And eventually, your videos came up that was, ask a psychopath. I don't know whose channel that is, but so that's basically how I found myself here. Uh, and then I found your channel, and I was listening to a few of your videos, and I was like, this is a psychopath. I'm like, this is like me, kind of. I see a lot of similarities with myself here. So I'm like, I better figure this out to see if I am. Maybe I am a psychopath. No judgment here right now. But at the time, I was like, shit, bigger problem than I thought.
Yeah.
So I took a test. It was, I have it written down here somewhere. It um the hair psychology checklist.
Yeah. Hair psychopathy checklist.
Yeah. I took it 3 different times. I got like anywhere between a 15 and an 18 each of the
Okay.
times. So it's not like super high, but I don't know what an average person would actually get on there.
Probably like five, maybe three.
Yeah. Some 3 times worse than the average
Yeah,
person.
3 times more enhanced.
Yes, definitely enhanced. This girl that I've been seeing, in the last couple years, we're not official or anything like that, but she's more of a friend right now. And she'll just kind of like jokingly, but also not super jokingly, she's like, "You're an alien." It's
Oh,
just
yeah.
when it comes to certain things, she's like, "Have you heard about this in the news?" Because I kind of, you know, went hermit for a little while as far as like paying attention to the news, and I was just doing my own thing. And
I
she's like,
love
"Well,
going hermit.
yeah, yeah." I just lived under a rock. I'm like, like I don't need this extra stuff in my life right now. I got enough going on anyway.
Yeah.
So it's like huge stories. I've just flew by. I'm like, where? I don't know what I was doing at that time. Wasn't a part of my life though.
Yeah. I've been called an alien too. I think that's a nice way to put it.
Yeah, yeah, it might be true.
Yeah. Stranger, pilgrim. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Um, yeah, so like that, like those videos of yours, I just like I had so many questions. I was like, I have to ask you, right?
Yeah,
But then I
do you
watched
have
a
them
few.
now? Okay, go ahead.
I don't have really a lot, but there's a few I could just bring up because I was like, you know what? Let me do my due diligence. Let me just watch a few more videos. Let me go through your FAQ page. Let me just, I don't want you to have to repeat yourself a million times. And there's no way I can go through all of your stuff. But
Yeah, I don't mind repeating myself either.
so like one of the things that like, like I guess as far as um my emotional growth and I guess personality and things like that, I felt that I have had um I just would call it arrested development, where like
Mm.
I'm a late bloomer with a lot of things. I've learned a lot of things late in life. I never really paid attention to emotions. I just kind of, would distract myself with different things, to just get through a moment. And one of the things that have happened to me recently, and I've had major changes in the last 3 years, really since moving and getting away from all my ties back where I used to live at. Basically it's like reinventing myself, and I get to be completely myself, or a little bit as much, more than I've ever have before.
Mm.
Just meeting new people, and each time you do that, you can reinvent yourself a little bit. You could show them the newest version of you without any, without your history tainting that.
Yeah, the you that dances.
Yes, the me that dances, and some of the other things that I'm into. But one of the things that I felt, which I never felt before, was love.
Oh,
I've never felt love before. I always
that's
thought
nice.
I
That's
always
great.
thought I always thought that I, knew what it meant or something like that. Like, oh yes, of course I love you, right? Like I never like, but what that meant was I would never want to see anything bad happen to you, but it wasn't a feeling. It was more of like a logical thing, like, oh, of course I don't want anything to happen to you, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And I've had girlfriends before, and I've felt it in that way, but it wasn't an actual like um, a deep feeling or anything like that. And then I met some new people here, and then like for some reason, like a couple people that I've met, like I've had that feeling, and like, oh my gosh, like like kind of crazy about these people, in a good way. Um, I never did end up getting with them, but still, it's still like kind of a recent thing that's happened. That's exciting. I feel a little bit more human. And I was going to ask you the same thing. Like, um, what do you feel, or do you feel love, or how do you? What is your take on that, as far as in your life, in your experience?
Yeah. So I think when like before I went to therapy and like kind of shored up my sense of self, I think that the love that I would feel for people was kind of like um like I thought of like a feeling of loss this way too. The loss that you experience is the space that they used to hold in your life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I felt about love is that love was just like loss before loss happens. It's just this the space that they hold in your life. It's like
Yeah.
their volume, the geography of them or whatever.
Yeah.
And so you have like this big, because think about this. I still love my teddy bear from like childhood and my baby blanket.
Hmm.
They have done nothing for me except comfort me and be there for for my whole life. But like why do I love them or something? And that I think is like the way that I saw everybody that I loved is
Hmm.
like I loved them like the bear and the blankie.
Hmm.
Where like, okay, you provide this like reassurance or charm, I'm charmed by you, or I get some other sort of pleasure or joy from the
Hmm.
fact that you exist and that you're in my life in a particular way.
Hmm.
Now I would say, and it's interesting that you said this, that now that you've moved, you able to be more yourself.
Hmm.
Interesting way to put it.
Yeah.
And since therapy, I have also been able to, I've learned to be able to be more myself. And now I experience love in kind of different ways where, I guess I'm not like a drinker really at all, but I feel like it would be like if I was drinking wine, as like a 12-year-old just to get drunk or something,
Hmm.
which I never did, but
Hmm.
versus like you're a sommelier that works at like some like Michelin starred restaurant or something,
Hmm.
and you've just developed a different palate that's like a lot deeper and
Hmm.
things. So I guess do you remember when you were little, it's like all ice cream tasted the same to you? You could like get the really cheap kind
Yeah.
that came in the plastic tub and it was
Yeah.
fine. And
Yeah.
now, like, I do not. I
Right.
refuse to eat ice cream unless it's like, and what changed about that? Like not the ice cream changed, but I changed. And now I feel the same way about love. Like love to me is like an acceptance of who the other person is.
Hmm. Hmm.
So like this kind of like deep place of understanding and acceptance and this willingness to like engage in them in a very kind of affectionate kind of adoration way, like
Hmm.
it's like willing to be caught up in them, willing to
There was appreciation, I think, with mine as well.
yeah, but also kind of the acceptance is interesting because that's I think where the real connection is.
Hmm.
But I mean, you can, like we've been talking about, you can accept even bad people.
Yeah.
But what is it that makes you kind of love something? I think it's that, like, why do I love, for instance, the composer Bach more than I love Beethoven? I mean,
Hmm.
there's something about you that's in them that like or interacts. There's like a chemistry there. I think that would
Yeah.
be difficult to describe. But before it was like I really was eating just any trash ice cream and calling it ice cream. I
Yeah.
was like experiencing trash love and being like, fine, that's whatever. And
Hmm.
now I am not satisfied with like the more superficial kind of, even if it has like some aspects of like affection or adoration, or, like they reflect parts of you back, or there's some chemistry there. There has
Hmm.
to be something more like a deeper connection. And I think that's where the acceptance comes in. And I think I never really was able to accept other people before because I hadn't really learned to uh, understand and accept my own self.
Hmm.
So it was really hard to kind of treat people as like separate individual people because I had no concept of my own self that way either. So I think that that's really key and a big difference too in the way that I used to think of love and the way I do now.
Do you give love? Like, is it a feeling for? Is it a or is it a concept of like multiple different feelings and I don't know, like properties of this relationship with the person?
I think like a really good, like a feeling that I feel from love is like a sense of warmth,
Hmm.
like almost like a continual, like if you had like a little microfusion generator inside your
Hmm.
heart
Hmm.
and it had that person's name on it. And that's
Hmm.
what they are. They're just like a little micro fusion generator, just generating like warmth and good feelings and like smoothing things over. So
Hmm.
that's what the feeling of love feels like to me, is just like a sense of warmth. And I think too, when they reciprocate your love and you get the acceptance from them, it's really validating to your humanity, that they see, understand, and accept at least like a bunch of stuff about you.
Hmm.
Because um, I think that's probably somehow required to feel like a sense of connection to somebody, is that they accept you. That
Hmm.
same dude who does my meditations, guided meditations, has one where he talks about how he did some research into psychedelics, near death experiences, and there was a third one, like maybe like religious something or something where you feel like you just are kind of taken out of reality, for a bit. And he said that everybody kind of described the same things, that they felt really loved and accepted.
Hmm.
And he was like, so one of the meditations is like, what does it feel to love and accept the people around you, and to feel like you love and accept yourself, and that you are loved and accepted by the people around you too? I
Hmm.
think that there's something really powerful
Hmm.
about acceptance. Speaking of acceptance with reality and stuff, about accepting people, that way too. I think that love is kind of like a gift of acceptance that we give people,
Hmm.
that we do not turn away from them. Like we're willing to hold space for them, I guess, and for their personhood, for their unique humanity.
Hmm. Yeah. And this is something that like I feel like, so I still have um love for an ex-girlfriend of mine,
Yeah.
and I don't think that's ever going to go away, right? If there's someone that's new in my life that might get jealous of that, I'm not going to bring it up or anything like that. But if my ex ever needed anything, I would be there for her, right?
Yeah, that's nice.
You
I
know,
don't
she
understand jealousy. I do not get it.
I experienced jealousy recently. Well, in the like
Really?
within the last few years, like that's like a new thing for me. Like I never had that before.
That's fun.
Hmm. I didn't like do anything crazy, but it was there. I'm like, oh, okay, okay, I can see
Uh,
that. But yeah, like I would, yeah, like so if my ex ever needed anything, I would be there for her, right?
yeah.
And she was just held, we spent 14 years together, so it's such a huge part of our life that there's
Yeah.
no way that if I can't get rid of her because she's part of me in that way. We grew together in certain ways, so we still occasionally, she'll still send me like the happy birthday or happy holiday, like little messages and things like that. We don't talk regularly or anything like that, but because of she's in a new relationship, so I do keep a distance because of that. um but yeah, so that's kind of how I feel about like most of the people that that I've had in my life, the relationships that I've had in my life, where even people that we kind of left off on a bad foot or
Mm,
footing, I would still accept them if they were willing to come back, you know.
yeah. That's good. That's nice.
Yeah. um yeah, I mean, and I think about it, and like people that have done me wrong, like they owe me money and they're not answering my calls or anything like that, that kind of thing. It could be stuff like that. And I would still like, I'm still like, I'm forgiving, right? To let stuff go, right?
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, there's a lot of other people in this world, right? So I'm also here meeting new people, and whatever it is that I need from people in my life, I can find it here. I don't necessarily need to go back to people of my past, and I definitely not dwell on those relationships not being there anymore. Um,
That's interesting to kind of think about too. I wonder, um, because I feel those kind of sorts of ways too, but there is something about like to the extent that, for instance, like my mom, like I feel like, is my mom willing to see the reality of me? Sometimes she is, and sometimes she's just less willing to or less able to.
mhm.
And I honestly feel less love for her. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not like a retaliation,
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
where it's like, like, oh, you did this to me, now I'm gonna do this to you or whatever.
Uh,
But there is something too about like people, like the more that you are able to be yourself and
yeah,
you are yourself around the other person, I think the more capacity there
yeah,
is for like acceptance, love, and understanding.
yeah. I love that. um, so how often do you meditate?
So I meditate usually every day. I have a reminder in my phone to meditate every day. Sometimes I don't, I have
Hmm.
a particularly busy
Hmm.
day, wake up and just have stuff going the whole time. Sometimes though, those days are the best days to meditate. It kind of depends. The meditation for me is that I know that there are things that I have a tendency towards. One of them is I have a tendency, I feel like a little bit of a tendency towards um maybe like a weakness, like a mind weakness to psychosis. Like I've
Hmm.
never actually experienced psychosis, but I just kind of feel like if I dabbled in psychedelics, if
Mhm.
I got too many brain injuries or
Uh-huh.
something, that
Hmm.
that would probably be, like something, that would kind of come up. So
Hmm.
I think that's another reason why I'm like a little fixated on reality is I
Hmm.
think about like, will I experience dementia,
Hmm.
early, or, what are going to be some of the things that will be a struggle for my mind because I've not been good to it, all my life. I've really kind of, you know, uh, put the pedal to the metal about
Yeah.
a lot of stuff
Hmm.
where I've just kind of like forced it, to do things. So now I try to like be more like, how people like I follow this guy on Instagram and he said that getting diabetes has forced him to listen to his body more
Hmm.
carefully. And I feel like having my mind kind of be like a little bit more loosey goosey, like in my older age, has kind of forced me to listen to my mind a little bit and try um, to not just kind of ignore it. Like if it's having a
Hmm.
hard time,
Yeah.
like what does it need? Does it need food? Does it need
Yes.
rest? Does it
Yeah.
need, yeah. Um, so I think the meditation is largely like if I don't have like just it's just like 10 minutes a day. If I don't have that time of like reflecting and kind of checking in on myself, I
Hmm.
think I have a tendency to get disconnected from
Hmm.
my brain, my body,
Yeah.
reality in general.
Yeah. I've had moments where, I've experienced the thought of I'm my best friend, you know, I'm my own best friend, in kind of self-love.
Good.
Not that often, but I've had that experience a few times.
It's really nice. I think it's like some of my meditations are that too. They're like explicitly self-love. And he'll
Mhm.
be like, put a hand over your heart or whatever and say like soothing things like, you got this.
Yeah, yeah, and mean it.
It works.
Yeah, I started meditating recently as well. Well, it was years ago now, but and I haven't really been doing it. Like I don't keep up with it because I
Uh-huh.
felt like it fixed me, and then I stopped doing it. You know.
Yeah. That's
Uh,
like this I have like tennis elbow, so I
mhm.
like use this little TheraBand guy
Hmm.
bar for like the tennis elbow, and then once it was fixed, then I was like, I'm done. And then the tennis
Yeah.
elbow started coming back. I was like,
Way back.
shoot.
Yeah.
Guess this is a lifelong thing. Okay, let's just stick with this.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe if I don't know what it'll take to get me back into doing meditations again. It was just that part of my life. It was a necessity for like survival. Um, and yeah, I don't know. Like it, I was able to start controlling intrusive thoughts,
Wow.
and at least letting those go away. I created all sorts of my own mantras. I was doing a lot of writing at that time to kind of like organize my thoughts, to try to, I don't know, make sense of things. Um, and the meditation, I mean, I guess I can kind of say that it was a partial meditations that I used to do back when I used to just go on walk. I'd call them like walking meditations. I'd go and I would actually record a monologue of my own thoughts. I would go on a walk and just start talking into the thing and try to like get somewhere with these thoughts, and don't let it get distracted by other things.
Hmm.
But it wasn't until just a few years ago where I actually did the sit in meditation. And I had a friend of mine that I met here. I don't remember what she called it, but we both meditated at the same time. We weren't in the same room even, and we both played the same music. She has like this soundtrack or whatever. And I literally, like, it was like an hallucination. Um, I went up onto the moon, right? So this was like the first meditation because she was like, I asked her, I was like, how long do you want to go for? She's like, oh, maybe 45 minutes. I'm like, 45 minutes? I'm thinking
Wow.
like, I'm thinking like 5 minutes, She's like, all right, well, start it at the last, start in like 40 minutes and then just meditate for like 5 minutes and then we'll come and we'll have a conversation afterwards to see what happened. We did that. And I was 2 minutes into this thing. I cut my meditation off. I'm like, this is insane. This is crazy. I literally floated up, basically landed on the moon, and I'm standing on the moon and I'm visualizing my friends and family that I've had in my life. They would stand in front of me, just kind of their arms, just they're just standing up tall, their arms draped down on their by their sides, and they had the biggest like absolute happy smile on their faces. Each of them, it was kind of like one of them would show up. It was like they're on a conveyor belt. One of them would appear in front of me, and they had the most genuine smile. And then they'd go off to the side, and then another person in my life would show up in front of me, and it would be the same thing. And it was basically like me telling them I love you to each of these people, and vice versa. You know, they accept me, I accept them, and then they'd move on to the next person. So I kind of went through these, and it was such a visual experience. Like I visualized this stuff, where after I've seen these people in my life, and I was like, holy crap, I can't wait to talk about what I just experienced. So, and then I looked at the time, I was like, 2 minutes, you got to be kidding me. It
Yeah,
was amazing
that's
feeling.
that is crazy and amazing. Yeah, I know what you mean about like habits or something. I follow this guy, Spencer Greenberg, and his podcast is Clearer Thinking. Because I was
Mhm.
on his podcast, I'm like, Spencer thinks like so much like I do on a lot
Ah,
of things. So I was like, I'll start following him. And
nice.
one of his suggestions was he has all these like little tools that are meant to like improve your life
Mhm.
with like science back things. So I chose like to try this gratitude thing. So every time I take like a drink of like a new drink of something, I'm supposed to be grateful. And he was like trying to get you to do the habit and stuff like, oh, I'll send you reminders and stuff. But it didn't take yet, but I'm not giving up. I think
Mhm.
it might eventually take. And it certainly does, pop up in my mind. I don't do it certainly every time I drink, like take a sip from like a new drink or something. But yeah, it's kind of hard. I feel like, and this is something that meditation guy talks about too. You forget and then you remember.
Mhm.
And like meditation's that way, you forget, then you remember. And I feel like life is that way too. Like there's certain things that I'll be like, suddenly realize, I need to be more this way or something. And it's been like 3 years since I even had that thought about the thing, but now I
Mhm.
realize, why did I just let this go?
Yeah,
This was such
for
an
real.
epiphany to me 3 years ago. Why
Yes.
have I let it just kind of like go in my life, when I know my life is worse, when I'm
Yes.
not like aware of it?
There's a long list of those things to
Yeah.
follow up with. Yeah, that
Yeah.
and I'm probably gonna head out soon.
Yeah.
Uh,
Good.
but I was just gonna kind of um, one last thing I was gonna talk about relating to whether it's like our personalities and emotional state, meditation, and all of that stuff, which is another kind of phase that I kind of went through, which was realizing um, kind of being different from the mainstream of society, that the culture that I live in, and thinking like in my mind, I'm thinking that the way that they act and the way that they behave is the goal, right? I'm like,
Mm.
I need to be more like them somehow if I'm going to get anything out of them, I guess. If I'm going to be able to have a fulfilling, loving relationship, I have to be able to be the person that they want in their life, right? So I have to work on myself, and I have a ton of work to do. Um, and it was at that time in my life, I was feeling I was having suicidal thoughts, um, and I felt kind of hopeless, and that nobody cared, whether for me, right? Everyone, I had like some type of moment of like everyone's just out for themselves, and there's nobody that genuinely just like cares, even people that were in my life prior. And it was kind of daunting at the time of like, damn, if I work on myself, it's going to take at least 10 years to even get maybe to average, if I work on these things, which, I don't always work on them. all of these things, right? I don't really focus on it all. I'm doing other things, but and it was kind of, yeah, it was just felt daunting. And then all of a sudden I got a phone call from a friend of mine here, and she pulled me out of this like haze that was like this like like dread that I was in. She just invited me out somewhere, right? She's like, "Hey, you want to come with me to wherever?" And I'll talk about this later if we talk. And all it was a friend calling me and giving me something to look forward to. Kind of pulled me out of that like terrible state that my mind was in at the time. Where, yeah. So it's just it's kind of strange the state of mind that we could be in at any given time, and how fast even that you can be pulled out of that in unexpected ways. Um,
Pulled out or
so
pulled in too.
what's that?
Pulled into that state too. How easy it is to be like,
Yeah,
suddenly this is what you're thinking, and you're like, where did this come from?
yeah. Um, I don't know. That's a great question. It like sometimes I feel like it's just there, and it never, maybe it was always there and it just kind of bubbled up to the surface. Maybe the focus is on that, maybe it's just I'm focusing on it and I'm dwelling on it. But it's such a mixed bag that, one of the best things, I feel like that we can do is just start taking care of the basics. Am I sleeping enough? Did I eat recently? Is it healthy food? Just basic care that you kind of have to force yourself to go do, even if you don't feel like working out. Like those are the times that it counts the most, is when you don't feel like doing it and you get over it, and it's it's a sense of accomplishment, and at least you have some type of footing on hope, or possibility of, becoming a better person or getting into a better state of mind, is that self-care.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So like, I guess right now, if I just think about like how I've been feeling lately, it's I've been in a better state of mind lately. I found new exciting things. I think like that's something that kind of keeps me going, is whenever there's new stuff in my life, I kind of get excited, and it usually picks me up.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree. I saw some advice online. The guy was like, you should have kind of like five little projects going
yeah.
on.
Mhm.
Because if one gets stalled, then you have the other four to kind of like keep looking forward to. But yeah,
Mhm.
I experienced this too, because I still feel like, I think, decreased engagement.
Mhm.
Honestly, I feel like everybody feels this way a little bit too, and they follow the news and stuff to give the illusion of engagement with
Mhm.
with the world, because it's easy to kind of care about like, oh, CEO gets gunned down in New York or whatever. I'm going to make this part of my personality for the next month.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where I'm like hot takes about it, and this is all I'm thinking about, or like,
Mhm.
like and it's kind of, I guess it's like being like watching a really good TV show. Like you're like, oh, I'm so absorbed in this TV show.
Yeah.
I feel like every day I wake up and just so excited to whatever. So these like I mean, they're nice, these little illusions of engagement, but I feel like there has to be something that's more like meat and potatoes going on, in terms of like finding, and this is what I think is interesting, is that a lot of the uh my increased engagement comes from like, again, listening to myself. Like,
Mhm.
is there something that I'm not engaging in, that like my body or mind or soul truly enjoys, but for some reason I'm like too lazy or too embarrassed
Mhm.
or too
Yeah.
whatever to like actually just dive into it, or to remember to do it, or to whatever else. I really think that it is like, it's so uniquely you, you know, it's like everybody can be involved in kind of like what do we call it? Zeitgeist
Hmm.
type movement or whatever. Oh, Black Lives Matter. We're all part of this now. This is our personality for the next 3 months, you know?
Hmm.
And then it gives you so it's almost uh like a little analgesic to your sense of
Yeah,
existential dread, where you're like, I don't have to think about me or life or death or anything for the next 3 months because all I care about is Black Lives Matter or something.
yeah.
And they're not bad. And some for some people they are, you know, lifelong passions that are like vessels for self-expression, you know,
Hmm.
meaningful self-expression. But often they're not. They're just like some way to get like the illusion of connection with other people, the illusion of engagement with the world, the illusion of, you know, having some sort of purpose to your life. I
Hmm.
think that's like it's a difficult question, and I think it's like only plays out in like kind of difficult ground, what do we say, grassroots
Hmm.
ways. Like it really is like just like the little things that we have to start engaging with and really listening to ourselves about.
Yeah.
You
Yep.
have to go.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually have a jam session myself to go to.
Nice.
Talk about it later.
I love that for you.
Yeah. 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 I definitely want to talk to you some more. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, I'll reach out to you. We could trade contacts after this, if you like.
Sounds good. Perfect. Well, thank you
Okay.
so much for chatting with me. I really appreciate it. It's been interesting to hear your thoughts, your 15 out of whatever 40
Yeah.
psychopathy score.
Yeah.
You're trying new things and trying to especially be self-aware. I really appreciate self-awareness in anybody, and I appreciate your willingness to talk about those things.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you as well. This is a great opportunity. I'm glad you're doing this and giving people like myself, a person to talk to about these
Yes.
things.
All right, have fun at your jam session. I'll chat you later.
Okay. Thank you. Take care.
Laters.